Okay, good afternoon everyone, and thanks for coming along. I'm going to just have a brief session on the whole area of the food safety management needs of global retailers. It's become a bit of an issue of late, and it will continue to emerge as a significant issue for many food processing companies globally as the dominance of these retailers increase. George Hell is the CEO of a company called Safefood 360, and we're dedicated to producing web-based software solutions for food processing manufacturing companies, assisting them to meet their compliance needs when it comes to not just the retailers, but also the legislation that governs their particular business. So the global food industry itself, it is a truly global industry, and it's estimated to be worth in the region of about $2 trillion annually. And in the US alone, there are in excess of 125,000 processing units. And the global food chain now is dominated by these global retailers, and the dominance is really set to increase. The estimate varies from country to country, but typically it can be said that about 70% of all food consumed is retailed through one of these large retail businesses. So because it's a global industry, the impacts of food safety issues when they arise are also global. And we can look back at issues as far back as 10 years ago with the Belgian dioxin scare, BSE as a major issue. And more recently then we have the Irish pork dioxin scare and the German E. coli outbreak, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. So as a global industry and a global supply chain, when things go wrong, the impact is felt right across the world. So as it stands, in terms of food safety management, the retailers are really driving compliance at the moment. Legislation and regulation in local markets plays a part, but the standards that are being attained by most food businesses who supply retailers is being driven by their requirements and by their standards. So the retailers themselves, there is kind of a framework through which they achieve compliance of their supply base. It kicks off with legislation, so the local legislation must be complied with, and any national requirements as well must be referred to in their food safety systems. But it's minimum compliance. It's just enough for you to tick a box so that you can engage in the process of developing a relationship with a retailer. After that, you have what we call the Global Food Safety Initiative, the GFSI, and this is really emerging now as the prerequisite to supplying any food retailers. So, for example, Walmart in 2008 made it a requirement to have in place one of the GFSI standards before they do business with you. The retailers' requirements for food safety management systems really finds expression through these global standards, of which there are, I think, 6 at the moment, including the BRC, the SQF, the IFT standard, which will be the French and German standard, the Dutch HACCP standard, and more recently then the ISO 20000, and specifically the FSSC 20000 standard. So these standards collectively really define what it is as a food business you must comply with to do business in any shape or form with the major retailers. But it's also becoming a prerequisite to supply products through the food chain in general. So there's many major organizations and food brands, even in America, that are now looking at the GFSI as their basic standard for approval and doing business with you. So in addition to that then, the third layer is the retailer's individual technical standards. So these build upon GFSI. They are far more detailed and prescriptive. So organizations such as Tesco, Marks and Spencer's will have their own unique set of standards which they would require you to comply with in addition to one of these global standards in the GFSI. So as you can see, it's quite a It's quite a detailed and layered framework for compliance if you're producing a food product and you're seeking to supply. The Global Food Safety Initiative itself, just a little bit about that. It's managed by the Consumer Goods Forum, and this is a collection of CEOs of all the major food retailers globally. And they really put it together back in 2000s to respond to the damaging consumer confidence base as a result of many food safety scares issues, particularly BSE and the Dioxin Belgian dioxin scare. The GFSI really defines what a food safety management system is, what a global standard is for food safety management. And it's, again, quite prescriptive. So the BRC and the SQF have to comply with their own set of requirements to gain entry and membership to the GFSI. So here are some of the standards. You'll probably be familiar with some of them. There are a couple of others. And what the GFSI allows is what they call mutual recognition between all these standards. So if you're a food business that has the BRC, in theory it's the same as having the SQF standards. So a customer should in theory accept one and not drive or influence a decision to go for another one. So mutual recognition. And in general, they do have that kind of similarity. Good news about this is that it allows us to say that globally, we have now defined what constitutes a food safety management system, which is an enormous step forward from where things were, say, 10 years ago. So these standards, what exactly do they ask for? Well, it's quite a long list of requirements, and there's only a few for you. So things such as HACCP, cleaning our plants, controlling pests, maintaining records of customer complaints, corrective actions, and so on. So there's quite a substantial burden of requirements for a food company to comply with if it wants to be certified under the Global Food Safety Initiative. But in short, it's broken down under three main areas. You must have your HACCP system in place, or your food safety plan, which should be based on scientific data. Should have prerequisite programs in place, which are the basic requirements for producing safe food. And finally, then you must have some high-level management processes in place. Now, all these requirements from multiple stones take place in isolation. They don't exist in a vacuum, and global events and trends in food safety influence what they do. And just very briefly, have a look at some of the more recent events, most notably the German E. coli outbreak. We had 04. It was associated with bean sprouts which were produced in a small farm in North Germany, and it was initially blamed on Spanish farmers growing cucumbers, and that had significant impact on the local Spanish farmers, and I think they were losing up to $200,000 per day from being blamed for this particular outbreak. What I did do was to brutally expose the weaknesses in the European system of managing food safety outbreaks, and events were really emerging much quicker than the regulatory authorities could react to or even assess and analyse. They haven't really pinned down exactly what the source of the contamination was. Some other recent events is the publication of the BRC issue 6. So this is just being published earlier this year. Companies are giving us some time to get their system up to date to meet it. It's not a revolution in food safety management standards, it's just a slight evolution on the previous issue. What they're looking at doing is basically tidying up the whole auditing process, make it more useful for the client company, producing better reports with more focused detail on what needs improvements. And also a greater focus on the practices on the factory floor and less so on the paperwork. So, another major change in the whole area of global food safety management is the passing of the Food Safety Modernization Act earlier this year by Barack Obama. It introduces new requirements for food safety and food defense for all producers of food in the United States, but also those companies who are exporting their product into the US. It requires food safety plans to be developed. Probably HACCP is probably the best way to put it. That should be based on science, and it includes very ambitious plans for the certification of all food companies globally that supply food into the US. The timelines for the introduction of all these requirements is actually quite tight, and there's a big question over resources necessary to really deliver this this particular piece of legislation. So the outcome of some of these recent events, again, time will tell, but the collaborate in Germany will probably have an impact on the EU policy, and how they respond to that is really unknown at this stage. We may see retailers introducing the requirement to test produce. So up until now, most of the testing that goes on for food supplied into these multiples is centered around high-risk products, waters and things like that. There's been no testing of basic produce. Will it trigger more resources to manage food safety globally? Again, that's another question that remains to be seen. The BRC issue 6 is really seeing the consolidation of these global standards by the retailers, and we're probably going to see more rigorous enforcement of these requirements within the food business. The Modernisation Act, again, question, will it be a revolution in food safety management in the States? Time will tell. Just a bit of perspective then on where things will go with food safety management in the future, particularly in relation to the retailers. There's no doubt that the retailers will increase their dominance in the marketplace, and that will obviously increase their strength to demand an improvement in compliance levels. Food safety is important for two reasons: it protects public health, but also protects very, very valuable food brands and food businesses. I think the GFSI is going to continue to be the core reference standard for food safety, and it's going to emerge as the standard right throughout the supply chain. So we know, for example, Coca-Cola have now taken a position that all their suppliers have to be GFSI approved in the next 2 years. So GFSI is becoming really the only game in town for food safety management and certifying yourself to it. I think again we can say that the demands for food safety compliance are only going to increase. And the impacts of that will be a massive, I believe, is a dramatic increase in the burden on the resources of food processing companies. More money is going to be required, more time to implement and maintain the systems. Knowledge and the gaps in knowledge to put these systems in place is also going to be a major issue, and skills are required as well. So the Food Safety Modernisation Act is requiring that all HACCP and food safety plans must be based on science, which is fine, but the question is, are the skills and knowledge there to do that? I think we're also going to see a dramatic increase in the number of inspections by regulatory bodies, third-party auditing bodies, and customer audits as well. So to meet the needs of the retailers, it's important for companies to select the right standard from the GFSI, find out what the gaps in their systems are at the moment, put the resources in place, and be intelligent about how those resources are applied. Use risk assessment to do that. Implement a system and review it, and then get your certification and maintain the system. So it's quite a logical, straightforward process. It takes time, typically around 8 months to 12 months to complete. Some of the barriers then, our supply chain is characterised more by the lack of compliance in certain areas than it is about compliance, and that's a gap that will have to be filled. Time and resources and knowledge, as I've already mentioned. There's also variation in interpretation standards by authors, and the BRC are seeking to address that now with the recent changes in their standard. Management indifference, I think, is also a major issue. So the food technologists and quality managers who are charged with the job of getting these systems into place often meet a wall of indifference from management, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at, not least in capital investment that's required. Just some final points then to close it off, and in a sense a reality check is that the perspective of food safety management globally is going to be more compliance, more assessment, more inspection, and more time taken up in demonstrating that compliance is in place. But the actions, whether it be the Food Safety Modernisation Act or whether it be the GFSI, I think will have to be based on a certain degree of reality, and must complement the commerce that surrounds this whole area. For example, the FDA will be increasing dramatically the amount of inspections they do on foreign plants, and they have quite ambitious targets on how they're going to do that. So philosophy appears to be the inspection of food safety into a global food supply chain, and that raises many issues. The experience of the European Commission, going back, say, to the introduction of their regulation on general principles of food safety, I think it's demonstrated that inspecting food safety into the system is not really a viable and realistic option. Communication, the science itself has to be consistent. So in the recent outbreak with bean sprouts, we had a situation where the Germans were blaming the Spanish farmers on the problem. The Spanish Minister of Agriculture was coming out saying that no, we've tested the product and it's safe. So a lot of confusing messages coming out, and it's not strictly speaking based on science. So the science needs to be more consistent and accessible to food businesses in a fashion that they can understand. The audit burden has to be looked at. One of the reasons that the GFSI was introduced was to reduce the amount of audits that food businesses have to undergo. And the reality since then is that, in fact, the burden has only increased. It became an additional audits which companies had to undergo. And then the application of IT solutions is absolutely critical. Much of the work on food safety management is centered around the collection, collating the data, and the communication of that data to other parties. And we've been slow to utilise IT solutions to solve that problem. And we can do that through the standardisation of many of the processes required in food safety and systems. That's it. It's a very brief overview of the requirements of retail food safety management. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them for you.